So welcome everybody. I'm really glad you're here. Wonderful to see all of your smiling faces. And this is part 2 of the Book of Ruth. So what I'd like to do today is I'm going to reread the introduction, that little introduction that I read yesterday, especially for people who weren't here yesterday. And then what I'd like to do is have several of you tell the story, recap the story. So whoever's comfortable, we'll just start with the beginning. In the beginning, there was a woman and a man, and they went to Moab, and there was a famine, whatever, as much as you like. And then when you feel like you've said enough, you stop. And then the second person will jump in and continue the story. And it may take 4 or 5 people till we get to the end of the story. But let's recap the story so that everybody, even if you weren't here yesterday, is pretty familiar with what we're talking about. How does that sound? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay.
And I just want to say that if anybody wants to speak, have a question, just click on the icon of raising your hand and I'll let Rabbi Sue know.
Right, because I can't see all of you at one time. Or you can just raise your hand and I'll see you either. And she'll catch you and she'll let me know that you wanna add something. So everybody feel free to jump in at any time. I don't want to be too formal. And there's a lot that I would like to cover because it's an amazing, as I told you yesterday, I love this story. I think it has so much to teach us and is so relevant to our times today. So the Book of Ruth is likened to a beautiful valley full of flowers, fertile fields, and gentle brooks. It is the story of a Moabite princess. And we didn't really talk about where is Moab. Moab is in Jordan. So when you're in Israel and you're on the Dead Sea and you're floating and you look across and there are mountains, hills there, that's where Moab was. It was across there. So she was a princess who abandons her life of privilege and luxury to become a Jewish convert, laboring in the hot fields and collecting gleanings to support herself and her mother-in-law. I love this book particularly because it is so honoring of women and their traditionally feminine values of compassion, humility, loyalty, and devotion. It occurs in a time of lawlessness. It is a story of transformation, of loss and grief into transformation. Hey, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. It is a story of 2 homeless, destitute, childless widows, the most vulnerable people in their society, who refused to become victims, never went into the why me. They gathered their strengths together to unite and take charge of their destinies. It is a story of 2 women relating across culture, age, and status. It demonstrates the power of expansive love. And as my cousin Joan from Haifa added, it is a rare moment of beauty, of perfection, a taste of the Garden of Eden. Michael Kagan talks about that it is a story of relationships, husbands and wives, parents and children, siblings, in-laws, between generations, between the insiders and the outsiders, between the haves and the have-nots, between the bosses and the workers, between family members, between ourselves and the land and nature, between the past, the present, and the future, between this world and the messianic world, between life and death, between mother and child, and between lovers. So, who would like to start retelling the story that we learned yesterday? Don't be shy.
I'll start.
Okay.
So.
Can't see you.
Yeah, I'm coming in, I'm coming.
Okay.
So this Israelite guy married a Moabite woman named Ruth, and he died. Who's next?
No, that's not the beginning. Sorry. Go back. Go back. Start with Elimelech.
Is that an important part?
Yes.
Okay, then remind me what, I don't remember why he was important.
Somebody else can start. Somebody else start then. Jump right in, because I don't want to waste too much time waiting. Jump right in. There's no wrong. If you're wrong, I'll just tell you you're wrong, like I told Howie.
Okay, I'll jump in. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a famine in the land. And this wealthy man named Elimelech took his wealth along with his wife, Naomi, and his two sons. And they went to Moab to get away from the famine and have a better life. And Machlon and Chilion, the sons, married two Moabite women, sisters, priestesses, Orpah and Ruth. And Elimelech died, and then followed by his two sons. And that left Naomi a widow with two daughter-in-laws. Okay, I'm going to pass it on now.
Great. Thank you, Rivka. Thank you. Who wants to pick that up? Come on. Don't be shy.
Okay, I'll go.
Thank you.
So you've got the three women, and the famine's over. Naomi decides she wants to go back to her people. And in the process, she's planning on leaving her daughter-in-laws and saying, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going back to my people. And the daughters say, no, we want to go with you. And on 3 occasions, she tells them, no, I'm going back to my people. You don't need to come with me. And they basically tell her, no, you're important. One of the daughter-in-laws does turn back. And Ruth says, no, where you go, I go. And that's the beginning of being included as part of a family. Although the story continues to keep referring to her as a Moabite, you see, the story keeps telling her, but Ruth and Naomi have decided they're family.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Good. Who wants to go next? What happens next? Jump right in. Anybody? They go back.
I can add more if you want.
No, add more. They go back.
They go back, and Naomi says she wants to find a family member, and she finds this man, Boaz, and it describes him as being a very good person. He is older, but he is a good person, and Naomi tells Ruth to go to the fields, and instead of begging, she's going to be able to glean what's left over in the fields. And Boaz allows her to do that and goes out of his way to make sure she gets even more than she would normally get from gleaning. So he honors her by, she's working to get something, and he makes sure that she gets even more by doing that. And then he ends up becoming her partner in order to pass on the lineage line so that she does become pregnant, and then he's out of the system. And then for things I don't completely understand, Ruth, the mother, is kind of gone, and Naomi, the grandmother, becomes more important with the kid, and that's a different story. But then we go to there.
Great. Thank you. So I just want to clarify the system that was in place with the harvesting of crops. There was a system in place in the land of Israel to take care of the poor. There were 3 different ways that the poor could gather food and not go hungry. It was called leket, shikha, and peah. And so the corner of the fields was always left unharvested so that poor people could come and collect it. And also, when when the workers were harvesting whatever the crop was, if they dropped something on the ground, they were forbidden from picking it up. So everything that was dropped accidentally by the workers was allowed to be gathered later by the people who were hungry. So nobody was going hungry. And so when she came to Boaz's field, that was what she was doing. She was following along the workers and gathering up whatever they happened to drop. And then Boaz, in his overwhelming generosity, gave her more and more food, welcomed her to his table, told his workers, do not molest her, do not, so that she could know that she was safe in. Now, Ayala and I were just talking about the fact that the grandmother was Naomi, ended up nursing the baby, and how she would have been so angry and said, give me that baby back. And in thinking about how it was in ancient times, I believe that that was not really an unusual action. I believe that in the old days, when we lived close by with our mothers and our grandmothers, and when we had babies all through our lives up until menopause, that mothers and daughters often were pregnant at the same time. And daughters were often the wage earners or had to go back to work, and grandmothers often babysat their grandchildren and were often lactating either their own babies or they had just finished nursing, and it was a normal thing for grandmothers to nurse grandbabies. And that's why we say bubby and nana. It's the sucking sounds. So this was unusual. It seems unusual to us that Naomi took the baby to her breast and nursed it, but I think that's evidence of how it was in those times when we were closer, we lived closer, and we had overlapping roles with each other. Anything else that was not mentioned? Julia?
Well, another interpretation of that is that Ruth is serving as a vehicle, a repository, a literal repository of Boaz's semen and then baby. And it's like, once she's done her job, she's dismissed, because after all, she's just a Moabite. She's not, I don't know what they would have called themselves, an Israelite. She's just a Moabite. She's like a surrogate mother. And so, okay, we've done with her, and now we can tell you the line of David. So it's, to me, it's very dismissive and kind of sad.
And Boaz is also dismissed. He did his job, he dropped dead after that. That's the end of him, one night.
Well, he was old. There was too much excitement for him, you know.
Yeah.
Leah Avital is asking if there's some understanding of why Ruth drops out of the picture.
I think that's part of it. She was a vessel. She was a vehicle to bring this lineage forward. So does anybody else have an idea about that? Yes.
Hi. So yeah, just sort of following through on that. It's really bothering me. I've studied this book before, and but it never was so clear to me how much out of the picture Ruth gets so quickly. And I think what's feeling dissonant to me is that I've always, the story is often held up as, Ruth is the first Jew by choice. So she's a role model for, other people who chose Judaism later. And also that, not only that, but she's also the ancestor of the Mashiach. So
Right.
It's quite a statement to say, not only was there a Jew by choice back in the day, and it was something, based on love, which makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people choose Judaism because they love someone who's Jewish, not always, but it's an example of that. And also the fact that someone who wasn't born an Israelite could become the ancestor of the Mashiach, seems like a kind of a typical Jewish story where the one you wouldn't expect is the one who
Exactly. Right.
is held up. So but reading it this time and seeing how Ruth just seems very much like, was it Julia who said a surrogate mother? That's exactly the word that came into my head yesterday when we were talking. It feels like it really pushes her out of the story, and it seems like that diminishes, in my mind, that diminishes kind of the specialness of her choosing Judaism or choosing Naomi, because she isn't really, there's no evidence that she's embracing the traditions. It's just sort of like she follows Naomi and then she gets to be a vehicle for helping her mother-in-law, which I'm sure she's fine with. But then also the whole thing about her being the ancestor of the Mashiach then also seems diminished to me, because it's like, well, her body came in handy and now we can let her go. So, but it's, so that kept coming back to me though.
Perspective. Carol, did you want to add?
Naomi.
Well, I just wanted to say that if we remember, Ruth took the initiative and she lay down by the feet of Boaz. She did an intentional thing. She always had in mind, I think, that she had a responsibility. I do think that as a Jew by choice, she was very much swayed by the values of Naomi and her people. And she probably saw how wonderful they were. And she wanted to be part of this, as well as she symbolizes, I think, I hate the word symbolize, but she implies how important it is to be so responsible in terms of knowing your true intention and carrying it out. And then also the value of loving her mother-in-law, the love that she had for her. I think that was very important in this story. And diversity is another thing that comes out in this story. Diversity, and she is responsible for that diversity that is, I think, a very important Jewish value.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Julia.
I wanted to say that Shira's been waiting with a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Okay, Shira, I didn't see you. Sorry.
Shira, you have to unmute.
Unmute, Shira.
Yeah, okay, got it. This is going back a step, because at the beginning, Elimelech was a wealthy man when he went to Moab.
Right.
So, and then we find when Ruth and Naomi are going back to her home, what happened to, if he was a wealthy man, how come they're having to sweep up the leftovers and so forth? How come they're so poor? What happened to his wealth? Do we ever know anything about that, or is that just kind of
when he died?
And his wealth died with.
Yes.
So
Yes.
they lost his wealth when he died.
Yes.
Well, that's not fair.
Yes.
But I mean, it leads into it takes us into the story of her having to take the gleanings. We wouldn't have that story if they'd inherited his wealth.
Right.
But anyway.
Right. They lost everything. It really is a story of supreme loss that we're going to talk about next. Thank you. Thank you. Who's next, Ayala?
I think you said Julia had a question.
Yeah.
Well, yesterday it struck me, I'm not that familiar with the story of Ruth, and it struck me that it's not a story of choosing Judaism, it's a story of choosing her mother-in-law whom she loved. And also it strikes me that she was married into a Jewish family. I think it said 10 years. So she would have been practiced Judaism throughout her marriage with her husband's family. She had already chosen, she'd already presumably committed herself to Judaism. To me, it's more a question of, I love Naomi, I'm going with Naomi, and the alternative, going back as a widow, a single, alone widow, going back to her people who were considered crap by the Jews, that was not a good alternative. I mean, that seems like a whole lot worse than the choice she made.
Right.
And Avital has a question also.
Yeah. Where are you? Yes, Leah.
Hi, Rabbi. So it also, see, adding to what people have been saying, it also feels to me that the whole story that is all about compassion and accepting diversity just completely feels like it turns on its heels if she drops out of the story and she's no longer important. Is there an understanding about that?
Drops out of the story. I think at the end of the story, the Naomi is glorified, and it's kind of like this all happened to Naomi, and now she is rewarded with this baby. I think that Ruth embraced the values of the Jewish culture that she was exposed to for those 10 years when she was married to Machlon. So, and she made the choice to follow her mother-in-law, not only because she loved her mother-in-law, but she loved the Jewish culture and didn't want to go back to the palace in Moab because there was such a contradiction in culture there. So I think that there's an embracing of the ethical values in addition to the love between the two women. Marty, did you want to say something?
Oh, I might be confused, but I was just wondering if there's something about, without sugarcoating this, about Ruth's humility, really deep humility, and maybe seeing that she could not raise this child as well as Naomi could, given her various circumstance, and here her second husband has just died and she's really left without anything, and maybe she felt, this is all just stuff, that maybe Naomi could carry this child better than she could, and there's something about giving birth to something and letting it go, being able to do that.
The surrender, yeah. There is a very strong thread of humility, especially in chapter 3, where Naomi's instructing Ruth what to do, to go to Boaz on the threshing floor, and she says to Ruth, "He will tell you what to do," right? And then in the next sentence, Ruth says to Naomi, "All that you say, I will do." And then a few sentences later, Boaz says to Ruth, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." So that is kind of the surrender, the humility, the understanding that maybe someone else has a little bit more wisdom than I do, and being able to give up to that and say, "Yes, you're right. I'll follow your instructions. What you say." That is the humility. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our most holy teacher, was known as the most humble man on earth. And so humility is a very treasured value in our culture. It's not submission. There's no negative aspect to it. It's understanding, you know how Rabbi Simcha Bunim said, we should have two little notes in each pocket. One is, "For me, the entire universe was created," and the other is, "I am nothing but dust and ashes." And really to really embrace that we are so tiny. We're so tiny. We're nothing but dust and ashes. And to be able to go from that place into direct action, that's a beautiful thing. That's part of one of the important lessons of this book.
Bob Lowe has a question.
What?
Bob Lowe is waiting to ask a question.
Yes, wow.
Thanks. Like so many other people in this conversation, I'm really struggling with the recognition of Ruth, that as you told the story yesterday, Rabbi Sue, of the beautiful flow between these two women and the commitment and compassion and generosity, and that is what created the Mashiach, or will create the Mashiach. It's just an amazing interpretation, and then I'm feeling some of that threatened or even taken away by the disappearance of Ruth. And one interpretation I want to throw out and see how you and maybe others react is that this story was written down by men, and that at some point,
Good, yes.
the extent of that depth of connection was too much to chronicle, and it had to be, well, let's get back to, it's just a uterus.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for pointing that out. It was supposedly written by Samuel the prophet, and that is a really, really good point. So,
Rivka's waiting with a question or comment.
who?
Rivka? Rivka, go ahead and unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So along the lines of this, I had made a comment yesterday that it was very fascinating to me. I never realized this until yesterday, that it wasn't Naomi or Ruth individually that named their child Oved, but it was the community of the Jewish women, the Israelite women. So another way to see this, in addition to what Bob said, which I agree, is written by men, so she kind of got edited out. But in the line of what you're saying, Rabbi Sue, about her being really, humble, it's almost like she becomes a part of that community. She's now, having given birth, she's fully entered into the Israelite community, and she's part of the women.
Right, right. So I got this beautiful paragraph from my cousin Joan yesterday, and that's about that. And what it is, if I can find it here, just a second. So Ruth, twice, Ruth was asked, "Mi'at, who are you?" Does anybody remember when that happened in the story? Rivka?
When I know one time when she came back after, so Naomi asked her after she came back with her night with Boaz.
Right, and who else? That's good. Who else asked her who she was? Boaz.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, when she showed up on the threshing floor, Boaz said, "Mi'at, who are you?" So this can be understood on a factual basis or on a more spiritual level. Ruth was trying to find not only a physical home, but also a new sense of identity and belief after her dramatic experiences. So much of the action happens outside of the city or at the city gates. The gleaning, the threshing floor, the Yibum ceremony with the shoe. After all the actions and decisions, Ruth enters the city at the end of the story. She has found her physical home and her spiritual home. So that's what you were talking about, Rivka. So I just wanted to talk, I wanted to see if we could categorize what were the losses. This is a story of tremendous loss and tremendous overcoming of loss. What were the losses that they suffered? Just call them out. And the easiest way to unmute yourself is just pushing down on your space bar. It will temporarily unmute you.
The loss of their life partners, their husbands.
Right, right. What else? Sorry guys. What else?
Loss of their livelihood. Loss of their livelihood or their.
Right. What else?
The loss of their homeland.
Their homeland. They were in exile. Right.
Loss of status.
Social status. Absolutely. What else?
Loss of the ability to have children. For both married 10 years with no children, and then it looked like they would never have.
Right. The loss of fertility. Good. What else?
Loss of life.
Of food.
Loss of family.
Family. What else?
Food.
Food. Right. They were in a famine. They had no food. What did they not lose? What did they never lose in the whole story, or what did they gain back?
The love for each other.
Their love, absolutely. What else?
Their hope.
Their hope. Good.
And their identity.
Strength as women.
Right, right. Their strength. What else? Can't hear you, Shira. You're muted.
Their strength as women.
Right, right. Their strength. What a self-empowerment, right? What else?
Their integrity.
Yep, their integrity.
The lineage.
The lineage, yep. What else? What else? What did they lose? What did they not lose that we in our time right now are threatened to lose?
Our individual freedom.
Individual
I was
freedom.
with
Dignity.
Reproductive choice.
all right,
Well,
Dan,
maybe.
Dignity.
What else?
Their
Some
lives.
very
Their
basic that
lives.
they're threatened with. Their
I was
lives.
going to
Their
say
health.
their sanity.
Right. So they had their lives, they had their health, they were isolated, but then they were able to socialize. They were able to come out into community. These are things that we really have taken for granted up until now, but we've lost that for now, right? So those are some of the things that they never lost. They never lost their connection to each other, to their community, to their land. So what were some of the lessons that we learned from this story about loss and overcoming loss? What were some of the lessons we learned from Naomi, and what were some of the lessons we learned from Ruth? Julia. Sorry, I have people in my house. I'll mute myself. You speak.
Okay. I would say determination, resourcefulness. And what was the question again? What did they not lose? What did they not lose?
What were some of the lessons that we learned from Ruth and Naomi?
Oh, well, resourcefulness, and on the part of Ruth, which has already been said, humility.
Right. What else?
Perseverance.
I think
Perseverance.
Ruth models something that I think I am finding in what's going on right now, is that people that we love are the most important thing of all. There's nothing more important than that, nothing more important than staying connected, nothing more important than knowing that they're okay, that's what's going to last. That's what we have.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Who else?
Randall has a question.
Yes?
Randall, you have to unmute.
That inside of absolute tragedy are blessings if you are willing to search for them with humility and with hope.
I think it's also important to note that they didn't buck the system. Naomi and Ruth went according to the laws that were in place, that were set up. And because they could have chosen otherwise.
Oh, right. And they refused to be victims, even though their circumstances were really terrible. There was no why me, poor me, I'm a victim. Instead, they figured out a way to be decisive and to take action to change their circumstances. So that's...
I think the fact that Ruth
I think that's
continued to go
really
through
important.
Oh.
Go ahead, Mata Esther.
No, I think that because Ruth continued to go toward Judaism, or toward, more important, she continued to go towards something she wanted, something she saw out there. That the lesson is to really, you can really go for your goal, or you can really go for what you see out there, that we can go for it.
Yeah, right. Decisive action. Julia.
Well, Naomi did do a bit of kvetching. I mean, she said, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara."
Right.
She did complain.
Just that one time. Just that one time. Now, this is the book of loving kindness. This is the book of Chesed. This is our manual for learning how to be compassionate. I'm sorry, I have handyman out there. I may have to just go and deal with him in a minute. But I'd like us just talk amongst yourselves and think about the Chesed, and I'll be right back.
Avital, you wanted to say something.
Should I talk now or wait for Rabbi Sue?
She's
Talk
asking
now?
that we continue the conversation.
Well,
Shira, you're next.
So what is so necessary and what we are seeing some of within certain circles and the opposite of in other circles is compassion, appreciation for diversity and different ways of seeing the world, different opinions. That's coming up so big during this COVID-19 emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Shira, you wanted to say something, and then Howie.
Yeah, I think the point that was brought up a few people back about not bucking the system, but finding ways to work with the system in their humility, and strength, seeing a way to work with the system to make things work for them to survive and thrive. And I think that's a good lesson for us. How can we, hostility brings hostility. How can we work with what is in a kind and gentle way, but yet a strong way to find the avenues that will work for what we need to do to take care of each other.
Thanks, Shira. And now Howie and then Rivka.
So to me, the message in this story is so simple, and it's in the structure of the story. And I was trying to get at it when I gave my tongue-in-cheek, this is how the story goes. It's like all the biblical stories are so dramatic, Red Sea and floods and whatever. In this story, basically nothing happens. They get married, they die, she finds somebody else, she sticks with her mother-in-law, they die, and they have a baby. And it's like you're hanging these ethical values on a story that really is so simple and so bare bones that all you really can do is focus on the ethics of it. And that's just brilliant.
Thanks, Howie.
Thank you.
Rivka, do you want to unmute?
Yeah. So one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that Ruth also said, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. And this story, I know everyone has a different relationship with God, but I feel like here that is something consistent. That's a lesson. And out of that, Howie, what you were just saying about the ethics, the whole core of the Torah is ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to love the other as yourself. And so it comes back, Rabbi Sue, to what you were saying, that this is so much about the God flow of loving kindness coming through.
So beautiful. That's really
hello. Yes. I wanted to say that there's a huge similarity here between the story of Moses, that both of them were born and raised by somebody else. Moses was taken from his mother, Zipporah, and Ruth's baby was raised by Naomi. And this seems to be a theme that the great leaders, David and Moses, both had in their lineage, that they weren't raised by their own mothers. I don't know why, but I just thought that was an interesting similarity.
That is interesting. And there's also a theme of the unexpected one becoming the leader that is followed through in the story. How Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob's, Joseph being the leader and Yehuda being the leader, not Reuven. So this is the following through with this kind of a paradox. Thank you. So I wanted to list the acts of compassion that we see in this story. who is compassionate to whom and in what way? Ayala.
Well, I think Naomi was compassionate to her daughter-in-laws by telling them, you know, your husbands are gone, go home to your people.
Right. She gave them the only thing she had left, which was a choice to not follow her. Right. So Naomi to her daughters-in-law, and who else? The obvious one.
Boaz.
Boaz. And what did he do that was compassionate? Let's list it because it's just an amazing list.
He was
Well,
generous.
he was willing to be the one to take over the brother's role. I mean, the role that would have been.
Even more than that, what did he do before that?
Susan Tuttle wanted to say.
Generosity, giving freely of the grain.
Right.
That was gleaning.
Right, much more than he had to. And telling all the other people not to molest this young girl and inviting her to his table and being sensitive after she spent the night and said, go out before it gets light so people shouldn't gossip about you. All of that was such sensitivity. My sister Lizzie, who was on the class yesterday, pointed out that there are a lot of these breaking down of duality. So in some other cultures, we would call that non-dual awareness. There's a lot when in Messianic times, when the lion lies down with the lamb, then we don't have duality anymore. We get rid of our duality, the binary. And in this story, there's a lot of that. The grandmother is the mother, and the Boaz has the traditionally feminine qualities of sensitivity and compassion. Naomi is the active agent who's creating change. So this is all messianic kind of imagery of where the boundaries have kind of faded out, and we have this non-duality and coming together. What else? What other acts of chesed do we see? Ruth to Naomi, obviously, when she says, wherever you go, I'm going. She was so devoted to her and loved her so much.
Not only that, but she also followed all of her instructions without arguing or it's just like, yes,
that respect that she showed. Now, Bob, you asked about the names of the lineage, and I did get that together.
Thank you.
I wanted to offer that to you. So I'm going to go backwards from David. So David, we know, means the beloved one. Like David is the same name as Lee. So David, the beloved, son of Yishai, the one who has God, son of Oved, the servant, son of Boaz, the strength within, son of Nachshon, the snake man, son of Aminadav, generous to his people, the son of Ram, the high one, the son of Chitzron of the courtyard, the son of Peretz, the smasher, the son of Tamar and Yehuda, the transformer and the grateful one. So those are the names of the people in the lineage, and the names of the people in the story also have very deep significance. So we talked about Naomi. What does Naomi mean?
Pleasant.
Pleasant.
Pleasantness, from Na'amah. Na'amah also was Noah's wife. Na'im is pleasantness, and Naomi is pleasant. And what was she called when she was bitter?
Mara.
Right, nice. And who else is referred to as pleasant? What do we say about the Torah? Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'chol deracheha. Noam. They're all of the ways of the Torah are pleasantness. So this is kind of a little hint to that. Orpah, we talked about, what does Orpah mean?
Back of the neck.
The nape of the neck. The two sons, Machlon and Chilion. Machlon comes from the word choleh, the sick one, and Chilion comes from the word destruction. Oh, Bruce Springsteen, you're right. He's here. That's great. Boaz is the strength within. Boaz, Oz is strength. What does Moav mean? Anybody know? Where Ruth is from, Moav? It means name of, from the father, because the original ancestor of the Moabites was Lot, who after the salt destroyed the whole earth and only Lot and his daughters thought that they were the last people on earth. His daughter, his eldest daughter, seduced him, and that baby was called Moav, from the father. Oved, the baby, what does that mean?
The servant.
Servant. And we see that also in the name Abdul. The name Abdul is Eved El, the servant of God, right? Oved, same name. And David, the beloved.
Beloved.
Beloved. So now let's talk about, why do you think this book is read on Shavuot? That is the big question. What is the connection between the Book of Ruth and the holiday of Shavuot, which is when we celebrate getting the Torah, getting the 10 Commandments and getting the Torah?
Isn't it also the harvest festival?
Yes, yes. It is the barley harvest, and this took place during the barley harvest. Good. What else?
The entire purpose of the Torah is to create a world of chesed. That the Torah is not about all the dramatic stories and the mitzvahs, but simply about this one result.
Right. You got it. Good. That's what I believe. I believe that the Torah is filled with laws and requirements and obligations, but basically we say Eitz Chaim Hi, she is a book of life. She's a tree of life to those who hold her. And the whole V'tomcheha mi'ushar, kol deracheha darkei noam, all of her pathways are pathways of pleasantness. So it's all about compassion. And if you interpret Torah in such a strict way that you don't get the compassion part, you don't get it. And I believe that's why we read the Book of Ruth on Shavuot. And I have more that actually substantiates that. So the tradition on Shavuot to not eat meat and only milk products, you don't have to kill anybody to eat milk products. So that's also a way of compassion. Milk, as we women who have had babies know, the act of giving milk is an act of compassion. When mom is angry or anxious or tired, she doesn't let down. The whole act of lactating is an act of compassion, of giving freely without asking for anything in exchange. And I believe that's why we are supposed to be eating milk products on Shavuot, because milk is, we say the milk of kindness. Milk is the one food that symbolizes chesed, compassion in our society. And there's one other hint that we have about why we read the Book of Ruth, and that is in the name Ruth. What does the name Ruth mean?
Friend.
From the name Reut, but that has an extra ayin in it. right? So that's a little bit of a stretch. Resh Vav Taf is just root. What does it mean? Who knows what it means? And how do we know what it means? Rebecca.
I have no idea what it means, but I was thinking so much last night after yesterday about the name Ruth and how our society just seems incredibly growing more and more ruthless and
Yes.
merciless.
Yes, you got it. Yes.
And how it is such like a milk of human kindness. Just try thinking, bring a little Ruth into this, you know, transaction, and let's consciously just bring it forward and lubricate that that transaction that discourse that we're building.
Right, beautiful, beautiful. So sometimes I think that because Ruth was known for her kindness, that the word ruthless came into our language as an antithesis of what Ruth was. So yes, I think the milk, the non-ruthlessness, and the freely giving and the compassion that was shown all through the book, from Naomi to her daughters, from Ruth to Naomi, from Ruth to Boaz, who was an old 80-year-old guy who she just loved and respected, from Boaz to Ruth, from the community to the women. All of this examples of compassion upon compassion upon compassion, selflessness, humility, dignity, respect. That's what the ethics of the Torah are. That is why we have a Torah. That is what we are celebrating receiving. The Matan Torah, the Torah that we are celebrating receiving, is the tree of life, the tree of goodness and compassion. And if we lose sight of that, we lose sight of what it's all about. We lose sight of why we are who we are and our most basic ethics. The reason that Ruth wanted to leave her palace, her country, and come into our culture was because of the strong compassion. What do y'all think of that?
It's so beautiful, and yes, so true. And I want to add to what you were saying, Rabbi Sue, about that whole gorgeous image of the mother letting down her breast, letting the milk come down. And Reb Zalman of blessed memory used to talk about that Shekhinah, right? And that's another connection to Sinai. We're in that moment of where Shekhinah is in her fullest and she's letting down her milk. She wants to give that to us.
Right, beautiful.
A mother who's tried to pump her milk and is having trouble knows that all you have to do is imagine you hear your baby cry, and bam, right? That compassion just
Yes, right, beautiful. Any other last minute comments? Julia?
My question for you, Rabbi Sue, is, are you saying that the Jewish religion, Jews, are more compassionate than other paths?
I think that the Jewish culture in that day was more compassionate than the Moabite culture. And I said something wrong yesterday. I want to just correct that. I got confused between Moab and Amalek. Amalek was the people who attacked us from the back. But the Moabite culture was known for being cruel and unethical and not compassionate. I'm not saying that now the Jews have the
monopoly.
Right. I don't believe in, Reb Zalman of blessed memory always talked about being in a post-triumphalist culture, that we don't believe we're the best or we have the only way to God. But in this book and in our teachings and in the way that we categorize our Torah, I believe that the most important value is the value of chesed and compassion. And that's why we read this book at this time, not because we have a monopoly on kindness. Thank you for asking, Julia. Matza Esther, and then Rebecca.
Yeah, I also think a big message of this book is that we can't go at it alone, that we need community, you know, and that we need Am Yisrael as community, but it's not about being alone. That I think that what you just said, but I link that to other, is that it has to be the power of community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we read it, on Shavuot, because we were Am Yisrael, you know, wait.
All one at right? We were all one. Yes, thank you. Beautiful. Who else was raising a hand? Rebecca?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say how I really appreciated your contextualizing historically the relative relationships, like between the men and women, etc. Because I'm thinking, oh, Boaz, I never knew he was like such a super great guy, that this was so virtuous. Like, oh, sure, you can clean up my backfield, and when you're done, you can clean up the front yard too, or something. and I would just think, as some like Schick said, that I would just think, oh, he's just a mensch, you know. But really, I mean, in those days and times in tribal culture, probably around the world, if you make it past virginity without being sacrificed to a fire pit or something, that was marks of some degrees of enlightenment within your culture. So yeah, I would certainly have to say that the root, you know, being so strong and in so many virtues and values, such a pantheon of everything, you know, there's no peer for that. I don't think elsewhere in the world, and the values are so eternal, and you pointed that out as well, and how pervasive, you know, for all humanity, not just for the chosen.
Right.
Have this path. That was really beautiful. But then I also just wanted to say quickly, I really took Howie's point that that this was a book where nothing sort of happens, and this story that I love so dearly, I've learned so much about in these last 2 days. But that doing, that undoing, and just being is really harder, I think, on the male side. And for me, it's not that different from my normal life, but there's been such a celebration of the values of just being at home and being with our near loved ones and family, and cooking again. You know, that's been like a silver lining, I think, for so many of us.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Yes. So there are a lot of lessons in this book for us in this time of the great pause, when we are struggling with trying to find meaning in what is going on and having so much unknown, and just really being able to rely on our inner values of connection and compassion and humility and dignity and respect and love. All of that, which remains true across time and space and always is true. So I gain some kind of comfort from this book, and I hope that you all got something out of it to help us through these very challenging and difficult times.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sue, and thank you
very much.
Any final comments?
That was great.
Howie?
Yasha Koech, Rabbi Sue, very, very nicely done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you here. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a couple announcements. We have tomorrow night our Shavuot service starting at 7:30 on Zoom. If you're not on our mailing list and you want to join us, you can let me know. And Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, not 10:30, we'll be joining for both of those services with Pnei Or in Portland. So it'll be very special, very beautiful.
And I just wanted to say also that I'm really honored to have my mother, Ruth, here, and Howie's dad, Jules, here, and my sister Debbie, and Howie's sister Merrill, and Howie's brother Stuart. My family has been in these classes, and I'm really, really honored by that, and by all of you participating. Israel, 2 people from Israel, really, that is just a wonderful benefit of this pandemic. So thank you all. Thank you for your beautiful, intelligent, deep questions and comments. You've added so much to the class. Thank you. I'm grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sue.
Thank you.
And as always, if you're able to make a donation of any amount, I put the link in the chat box. We would really appreciate it. You know, every business and nonprofit are challenged today, so thank you. Great teaching, Rabbi Sue.
Yeah, thank you all. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you.
Rabbi Sue, you might want to check the chat box if you haven't been able to see it before we get off, in case you want to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, I was